Hello, Steve Fletcher here, and welcome to this little video log. How to get started, really. David Gilmour in one corner, Roger Waters in the other. Now, if you don't know who those two names are, you're probably best to press stop right now. They are, of course, the two main figureheads in the amazing band that still is called, but doesn't really exist anymore, Pink Floyd. And over the past few months, they have once again been at each other's throats. So I just thought I'd sort of go into a few little theories of mine as to why that might be, what's gone off, stuff's happened behind the scenes, etc. Yeah, so sort of where to get started, really. I think I'm going to have to go back to 2005, which, as ridiculous as it seems, is nearly 20 years ago, as I'm sort of broadcasting to you today in 2003, in September 2003. Yeah, I was at Live 8 in 2005. Aren't I lucky? Now, unlike Live Aid, people tend to forget what Live 8 was in 2005. Now, obviously, Live Aid in 1985 was the day when sort of Bob Geldof, terrified a lot of famous people and the rest of the world into sort of helping him put on what was quite possibly one of the greatest charity concerts of all time. Not forgetting it was also the day that Queen dropped what is probably the greatest 20 minutes any band has ever dropped up until that point. But Live 8, people tend to have different sort of recollections of it. Really, actually, to the point where people hardly remember it at all. I mean, that was the day 20 years later that sort of Bob Geldof did it all again. The 2nd of July 2005, the idea being not to raise money, but to raise awareness. Because the G8 summit was taking place, and the idea was to put sort of public pressure on the world leaders who were taking part in the G8 summit to sort of do the right thing, etc., etc. There's a lot more you can look up for the sort of Live 8, G8 political sort of machinations of all of that behind the scenes. You can look all that stuff up on the internet. I'm not going to bore you with it anymore. I guess sort of so few people remember Live 8 because sort of in hindsight, it's just really another in a long list of charity-based concerts that have happened, since Live Aid. It seems like any time, anyone stubs their toe, someone has to do a charity concert in aid of toe stubbing, awareness and stuff like that. But, you can't complain. I mean, who doesn't love raising funds and awareness for charity while simultaneously watching their favourite bands? Well, me, definitely. And Live 8 has a resonance that puts it head and shoulders above all the others, certainly for me. And that is because, one, I was there. Yes, I was very lucky enough to get my hands on a pair of tickets. You couldn't buy the tickets. They were allocated via a raffle. And yes, so I was very lucky to be gifted some tickets at the time. Number 2, Pink Floyd was reforming. And not just any old incarnation of Pink Floyd. They were reforming with Roger Waters. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the details of sort of post-1985 Pink Floyd history. If you're a fan, then you probably know all that already. If you're not a fan, you probably already stopped this blog and you don't really care. But to summarise, it essentially boils down to a nasty feud between Roger Waters, who at that time was the main lyricist, the main ideas man of the band. You can't take that away from him. And the other members, because Roger Waters decided at the end of 1985 to leave Pink Floyd, thinking, because he was the lyricist and the main ideas man, that the rest of the band would do nothing with the Pink Floyd brand as he left it. He was wrong. They did go on to do other things without him as Pink Floyd. I'm not going to get into the merits of that in this blog. I quite frankly don't care. If you think 40 years after Roger Waters left the band, there's still any merit in there being a pre-post Roger debate, then I think you need to get a life, quite frankly. But anyway, so it has sort of grown into this mythical, legendary argument. Courts were involved, lawyers were involved, blah, 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 blah. And it has grown to this mythical status as the rock and roll feud to end all rock and roll feuds. Now, Pink Floyd themselves performing would have been enough because Pink Floyd had been on ice since 1994. So 11 years, Pink Floyd had done nothing. Not a note, not a whisper, not anything. And David Gilmour, the sort of current leader of the band, had said in many, many interviews that there was no plans to do anything. He was bored of it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. You know, he just didn't see the merit. He didn't know what they had to prove anymore. It didn't look good, quite frankly. Anyone who knows me knows, you know, my complete love and obsession with Pink Floyd. So upon hearing the news that this was happening, I was going, whether it was via hook, crook, black market tickets, or a hole in the fence, I was going. And my dad was going as well. Now, as you can expect, on the day, there was the usual big names, U2, Elton John, Sting, Madonna, Macca, as well as a smattering of current acts. Some still exist, some don't. Some I couldn't even tell you any of their songs and all that kind of stuff. I'm particularly pleased that I got to see Coldplay just on the side. I've got no problem with Coldplay like some people do. In 2005, they weren't yet Coldplay, you know, although they were very much on the ascension. So I'm quite pleased that I got to see them, and I've not actually managed to see them since. It's on my to-do list. The other thing that I remember the most on the day was just the amount of famous other people that we saw, you know, not just the bands, you know, but, you know, other famous people. Brad Pitt turned up, David Beckham turned up, Dawn French, Lenny Henry, Kofi Annan, Peter Kay, you know, Bill Gates, you know, the list just goes on and on. It was a real crazy day. I remember sort of the Sunday after it, just sitting down and thinking, how many people did we see yesterday? You know, the amount of people that we saw, it was ridiculous. And then Pink Floyd played. I mean, oh, Pink Floyd, the beautiful band that I love. The reason that I have, the life that I have, the musician life that I have, Pink Floyd. You know, I don't want to turn this into a love song, but, you know, maybe I do a little bit. There's so many things that I can remember. I'm not going to go into a minute-by-minute, blow-by-blow account. So, you know, you got Breathe, which was probably the biggest surprise of the whole set. In hindsight, really, Pink Floyd's set was probably going to be, you could probably make a pretty good educated guess at what Pink Floyd's set was going to be. So you had Breathe, which was probably the biggest surprise. You know, obviously you were going to get Money. Obviously you were going to get Comfortably Numb. Wish You Were Here, I think, in there as well. So you could probably have put a fairly solid shout. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, you can see why it would be kind of a good idea for them to have played it. It was their biggest song. It was a number one. But obviously, in the context of the concert that was happening, singing We Don't Need No Education at a concert that was raising awareness for people in Africa who were absolutely crying out to go to school was just obviously not going to be a good idea. So it's probably a really good shout that they didn't perform that one. I mean, as it turned out, you know, David Gilmour thought that as well. I think Roger thought that they should do it. Gilmour thought that they shouldn't. And this is where we sort of get this little bit of an idea of, even though they were sort of back together, it was just so obvious that they are at complete loggerheads for where things go. You know, Roger apparently turned up with a whole list of other songs. You know, I've heard rumours that he wanted to do In the Flesh, he wanted to do Run Like Hell, and Another Brick in the Wall, you know, and make it all about the concept, whereas Gilmour just wanted it to be a celebration of the music, to the point where Gilmour, according to Rick Wright, said, we're Pink Floyd, we're going to do these songs, and if you want to play them with us, that would be great. In other words, get back in your box, Roger. And Roger, to his credit, did say that he was prepared to roll over for the day and did just play the songs that they'd chosen. So yeah, Money, Wish You Were Here, Comfortably Numb, all absolutely interstellar. Like I say, I'm not going to go through a blow-by-blow thing, because that's not what this vlog is about. I'm trying to get onto this sort of idea of why I think, or maybe why I think, things have fallen apart since then. Now, of course, there's been no Pink Floyd reunion since then, and the sad loss of Richard Wright in 2008 pretty much puts that down to a never ever going to happen. Certainly from a live point of view anyway. We did get, again, for charity, the Hey Hey Rise Up single, which I've done a vlog about previously, and you can see that up there. In the immediate aftermath of Live 8, both Gilmour and Waters, you know, can't be denied that it was, you know, the Live 8 event helped their careers massively. Gilmour and Waters both went on the road. Gilmour with his new album, On an Island, and he took Richard Wright with him. And Roger Waters went on and decided to go on the road with a rendition of Dark Side of the Moon. And he took Nick Mason with him on a select few shows. And there was also the news that both camps were simultaneously rehearsing at Bray Studios. So surely you would have expected it could only be a matter of time before we got a reunion of sorts again. But no, it just didn't happen. We did have a very awkward meeting filmed. It's on the Remember That Night DVD, as on the documentary where David Gilmour and Roger Waters had a little bit of a get-together again. It is monumentally awkward in that sort of British stiff upper lip way that only Brits could possibly do. It's just small, the most excruciating small talk you can possibly imagine. And then we had all four of them, Waters, Wright, Gilmour and Mason, performing at the tribute concert to Syd Barrett in 2007, but not all at the same time. Waters performed one of his own songs. God's sake, Roger. And then apparently he buggered off. He had to go and pick up his missus from the airport. That's the party line. So he didn't hang around and didn't play with Gilmour, Mason and Wright on Arnold Lane at the end. Curiously, they weren't billed as Pink Floyd. They were billed as David Gilmour, Nick Mason and Richard Wright. So during this period, you had a spate of documentaries. We had BBC's Which One's Pink, the story of Wish You Were Here. All of the Floydies were interviewed, including Roger, saying something that he's previously declined to do is be involved in sort of Pink Floyd related documentaries. So, he remarked about the falling out in 1985 that he was behaving very pompously, trying to stop the band from working. It wasn't up to him. Did he really believe it? Was it all for the camera? Who knows? Now, like I say, sadly, we lost Rick Wright to cancer in 2008. And for most, including me, that meant that as a performing entity, Pink Floyd is just, no, you just can't do it without Rick Wright. And glowing tributes were given, including by Waters, to his contributions over the years. Now, it wasn't over then. We're not then over for reunions, because we got another reunion of Gilmour and Waters at a charity event for the Hoping Foundation, where they played a set. They played Wish You Were Here. They played To Know Him Is To Love Him, a strange little cover, but it was apparently a bit of an in-joke for Gilmour, that it would be really funny if they sang it together, because they've been at each other's throats for such a long time. We got Wish You Were Here, Comfortably Numb, and Another Brick in the Wall, after loads of donations were given on the night. Gilmour, in payment for Roger turning up at the Hoping concert, Gilmour performed a passable, mediocre rendition of Comfortably Numb at one of Roger's 2011 The Wall concerts at the O2 in London, where again we got Mason on stage as well. Incidentally, that's the only time the Final Cut lineup has appeared live on stage. And we got backstage footage on YouTube of them, chowing down, having dinner, having a chat, joking, being silly. So it did kind of look like we'd reached a phase where they were, if they weren't able to sort of work together, long term, they were at least able to sort of tolerate each other to that point where they could get the job done. It has to be said that all these reunions have all been for charity. None of them have been for the fans or for the joy of doing it. It's all been for raising money or awareness for charity. And it has to be said that if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't have had any of this. And looking back with hindsight, I do wonder if in the years sort of immediately following Live 8, from 2005 to 2011, 2012, Roger had started to feel a little bit more like, if he wasn't back in the band, he was at least back in the, he was at least going to get invited to the party. He was back in the fold. He was being more included in Planet Floyd life. That's the way I sort of think that might be what sort of happened. Who knows? I mean, he certainly did seem to regard his life in Floyd, especially the time post 1985, very differently. He was sort of all warm and smiley about it. There was a video, a video of him signing a poster for Pulse, which he had nothing to do with. It was in a time when he was very estranged from the band when they released the Pulse album. But he a fan had sort of brought it to him, and he joked about it. Oh, what's this? But he signed it, and he was very jokey about it. So we did have this definite thawing going on. It's sort of like divorced couples, after a few years after the fallout is sort of, they don't really want to be together. They don't want to spend a lot of time together, but they can be in the same room at parties and events and stuff, and, be pleasant to each other, which is, and mature and grown up, which is how we should all be, really. People have this impression, even before 1985, that they were all bosom buddies. They weren't, and being in a band is not like that. It's not, with a few exceptions, which I'm sure people will comment, but being in a band, it's very much like work. It's like working in an office. Those people there are who you work with. You're not their best friend. When it's finished, you will go home and you don't have anything to do with them. And it's that sort of idea, very much that same sort of idea with bands. So they were never bosom buddies. They just got the job done, and chemistry-wise, they were perfect for each other. Now then came a massive surprise. In 2014, it was announced that Gilmour and Mason, very out of the blue, were going to release a new Pink Floyd album. Now, strictly speaking, it wasn't new. It was made up of the leftover musical material that they'd sort of hashed out while they were writing what would become the Division Bell. And they've spoken about it previously, that there was loads of material left over. Should it have been a new album? No, probably not. It should have probably been included as a bonus disc on a deluxe box set of the Division Bell. It's not really what I would consider a new Pink Floyd album. It's worth getting for the song It's What We Do, which is just classic Floyd fare alone, but it's not really what I would consider to be a proper Pink Floyd album. I haven't got a problem with them using old stuff. They've been doing that for years. Us and Them was written way before it was included on Dark Side of the Moon. Sheep and Dogs from Animals were written during the Wish You Were Here period, not put on the Wish You Were Here album, discarded, reworked and reused again on Animals. There's a lot of stuff on the final cut that was going to go on the wall but didn't, but they reused it again. So they've got a history of reusing old stuff. So that didn't bother me at all. It's just not a very strong album. It doesn't really deserve to be the final Pink Floyd album. Like I say, it should have been included on a deluxe box set at the Division Bell. But Roger was specifically not on the album. And people would be asking Roger about it. Oh, you've got a new album out. And I think he was getting a little bit pissy about that. He made it very clear that he wasn't on it. He did a particularly sort of snippy statement clarifying that he'd left Pink Floyd in 1985 and that David Gilmour and Nick Mason constitute what is Pink Floyd. Still, wished them all the best with the album, but he did make it very clear that he wasn't on it, and why should he be? That kind of attitude. So there was a bit of he didn't really need to say anything. No. His official statement was typically Waters-esque. It's quite confrontational. Things were, I think, at that point, going a bit iffy. Then came the revelation that Roger wasn't being represented on either the Pink Floyd official website or on any of the social media pages. I have to be honest, I hadn't even really noticed that. Now, how did we discover that this revelation? A very nasty video posted online by Roger in a very, very ranty video. And then we got yet another ranty, angry video in which he made very public criticisms of Gilmour and co. about the release of the Animals album. It had started to not look good. Now, obviously, I don't have the first foggiest idea what's happened behind the scenes. Roger is very, very good at pointing the finger, naming slights. This has not gone my way. This isn't fair. Blah, blah, blah. But not giving a lot of details. I don't think Roger can ignore the fact either. He's made some very nasty, personal, nasty statements about, Gilmour's wife, Gilmour's family, which goes beyond the business side of Pink Floyd. It's just nasty. And Roger sort of does very easily forget that. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, if, Roger had made half the comments he has about my loved ones, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with him either. So I kind of can't blame Gilmour for that one. Roger, like I say, is very keen on pointing the finger and saying, this isn't fair, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't give you any details on what he's done and what's gone on behind the scenes. At the time, Gilmour didn't really say anything. He didn't make any comments about it. He sort of maintained his dignified silence, which, for the most part, he has done. Roger's always been a very diverse figure with regards to his political and other beliefs, and he doesn't shy away from his beliefs, and he doesn't deliver. And what I think rubs people up the wrong way with Roger is he doesn't deliver his opinions in a way that you want to see it from his point of view. He delivers his opinions in a very angry, aggressive, confrontational, this is what I believe, it's right, if you don't agree with me, you can... That's how he delivers his opinions, and it does rub people up the wrong way, and I don't think there's any need for it. So I think this is probably why Gilmour has sort of attempted to keep Roger at arm's length, because he is such a massively divisive figure. And if you look back, these things that I have mentioned before, the 2000, the Live 8 reunion, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame initiation, the induction rather, the meeting in 2006. It's all very stilted. It's very awkward. It's very much sort of Gilmour going like that, Roger being like, hey, be my friend, and Gilmour being like, yeah, I'm not going to hug a polar bear. And Roger's made some very sort of strange comments about the Ukraine war, seemingly very pro-Putin beliefs, which again, I'm not really going to go into. And there's this ongoing, bubbling along opinion that he's an anti-Semite. Now, again, I'm not going to get into that. But it's there for sort of people to make their own judgment on. Because of Roger, because of the way he is, the way that I think, he does things, and like I've said, the way he's very confrontational. Some things that you might have done 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's just not appropriate now. In the age of social media and wokeness and people very easily pointing and saying that offends me and stuff. Some of that stuff, it's probably better off to just err on the side of caution and just let it go. Performing things like In the Flesh, which we Pink Floyd fans know is part of a rhetoric of the story, of the Wall. So when Roger shouts things like he's going to shoot Jews, he doesn't mean it. It's not Roger Waters saying it. It's the character of The Wall. We know that, we Pink Floyd fans. However, the vast public don't know that. What the public see is this headline of Roger Waters is an anti-Semite and then putting in his concerts a song about shooting Jews. It's just not sensible to carry on down that road. But he does. And again, he doesn't do it in a way of trying to explain himself. He does it in a way of saying, oh, you're stupid to think that. You obviously don't know anything about me. You can get stuffed. Again, in a very confrontational and very divisive way. And then, earlier this year, Polly, Gilmour's wife, posted a tweet in which she accused Roger Waters of being an anti-Semite to his rotten core, along with a lot of other very nasty things, tax avoiding, money grabbing, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Some quite nasty stuff. Again, very little detail on where this has come from. Gilmour then retweeted it saying, I'm sorry, this is all very true. Again, not a lot of detail. The thing that I sort of find strange, though, is that's actionable. That's right there in print as slander. Behind the scenes, stuff has happened that we, the great unwashed Floyd fans, don't know anything about. What has happened? Like I say, we just don't know. Polly and Gilmour are obviously involved with Waters in a business relationship that we aren't privy to. Something has happened that's caused her to say that. And because she said it in print, on Twitter, on social media, and it's slanderous, Roger would be within his rights to sue her for defamation or something like that. But he hasn't done. What he did do, again, was make a very nasty statement, this time at a live show, about Polly, saying, imagine waking up next to that even in the morning and stuff like that. It's just not nice. And it's quite childish. And the thing that is ultimately very sad about this regression to public bickering is the thought that time is inevitably going to march on the remaining members of Pink Floyd. They didn't get on very well at the best of times, which I've already spoken. But enough water had flowed under the proverbial bridge since 1985 that they could at least start to feel differently. They could be within each other's company. They could tolerate each other, To paraphrase, John Lennon, when he was asked for the umpteenth time if the Beatles were going to get back together, he just sort of said, yes, wounds are all healed, memories are all fond. And sort of Floyd had got to that stage where if they couldn't work together full time, they could still do the occasional thing and it was okay. They had to sort of do it through gritted teeth, but they could do it and the fans loved them for it. But now they're at the stage in their lives where they are knocking on the door of 80 years old. There's just no way that enough time is going to go by that water is going to flow under that bridge again. And that is a tragedy. They are going to take this to their graves. And that really is very, very, very sad. The thing that you sort of can take as good is the body of work is obviously still there. Pre-Gilmour with Sid, classic lineup, post-Roger, Division Bell era. In 50 years' time, it's not going to matter. It's just going to be a body of work that's amazing. And all of this public bickering on Twitter, it's just going to be at the bottom of someone's Twitter feed somewhere. So that's not really going to matter. But it's just really, really, it's just sad and a bit pathetic at their stage in life to be doing this when they could just be celebrating that body of work. One thing that Live 8 highlighted was, whatever pinch of salt fragments of contributions that made Pink Floyd what it was. I wrote this, you didn't write that. I had the idea for this. The arguments that, permeate Pink Floyd discussions. The thing that made everyone love Pink Floyd was just simply the fact that those four individuals were brilliant together. They had a chemistry that no one else had, and they were brilliant. And like I said before, fortunately, that is what people will remember them for. It's just the same that we Pink Floyd fans are living through this era of nastiness yet again. So yes, thank you very much for watching. I know I've waffled quite a bit, but it's it's quite dear to my heart. Is this normal service will be resumed at a later date. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.